many people talk about inspiring life stories of mathematicians. I thought that maybe I can do a bit different, something which is close to my interest because I have an interest in philosophy. So I thought Bertrand Russell would be the best name on which I can talk about. So I have chosen the title as 1 plus 1 equal to Lemmas, Logos, Libertas. Lemmas represents the mathematical life of Bertrand Russell, or whatever he did. We will know about the story of 1 plus 1 equal to 2, why that comes up. Logos is a Greek word which means divine order. This word is used, comes up mostly in the philosophy of Stoicism, and this comes up again and again in many philosophers' works when they talk about anything which describes why nature is how it is. So it is a very fundamental philosophical concept. So I have chosen that word logos. And Libertas was a Roman goddess, and that goddess was meant as she was the personification of liberty. So the Roman goddess Libertas, actually the Statue of Liberty is the Statue of Libertas, the Roman goddess Libertas. So Bertrand Russell himself has done a lot of political activism and pacifism, and he fought a lot for the liberty of people, of women's rights and education of children. So we will go through his life and try to see how such a great mind thought and how he was a polymath and lived many lives in just one life. So this is the table of contents. I will begin with his lineage, which is a very important aspect because that determines a lot on how the thinking pattern of a child is. It had a huge impact on his life, but again, you will see how Bertrand Russell fought against his lineage and he developed his own philosophy. He was influenced by the philosophy of his the philosophy through which he was grown up, but then he developed his own philosophy and he wrote a lot of things, and he influenced many other philosophies as well. Then we will go into his mathematical work, then the philosophy and liberty, and finally then in the legacy part I have just included one video. I thought what else I could talk about. I mean, everything, all the great works this man has done will be talked about in the 4 sections. But at the end I just found a very nice video of Bertrand Russell, and that is a suspense I'll keep for the last, so you'll see that. Okay. I'll begin with lineage. Alright, so this is a picture of Bertrand Russell. He was as a schoolboy in Pembroke Lodge. So he was kind of homeschooled, as in he had private tutors only. We'll see how this happened. So Bertrand Arthur William Russell, that was his full name, and he was born in 1872, so that's a long time back. And he was born into a very influential family with very liberal upbringing. I have written the word Dadaji because many characters come up, like his nani comes up, his dadi comes up. So maternal grandfather, paternal grandmother, it was all a bit confusing, so I just stuck with Hindi. His Dadaji knew Napoleon Bonaparte, and he had talked to Napoleon Bonaparte. He had served as the Prime Minister of UK for 2 terms. So you have to realize that in the 1840s, Russell's grandfather was the one who was one of the first proponents of the idea that Britain can be a democracy. So he comes from a very liberal background, and he served as the Prime Minister for 2 terms. This is one of his childhood photos. His parents themselves were early advocates of birth control at that time, and his father was a deist. I'll explain what deist is. Deist is a deism is a philosophy which says that which accepts a creator, but says that the creator doesn't interact with the creation. So God has created this universe and left. Now we as humans have to figure out only through logic and rationality how this universe works. So his father was a deist, and there was one other philosopher, John Stuart Mill, who was very famous at that time. His father was friends with John Stuart Mill. Russell's father suffered from depression, and he knew that he would not be able to live long. So he gave the job of raising his son, intellectually raising his son, to his friend John Stuart Mill. He made him his godfather, so that he could influence how his son would be thinking. Because at that time it was mainly there was a lot of Christian influence in Britain. So the father wanted that his son would be raised an atheist or an agnostic. He himself was a deist, but he wanted his son to be raised an agnostic. And he had requested the philosopher John Stuart Mill to make sure that this happens. But before Bertie turned 4, he lost both his parents and his elder sister to ill health. His mother also was a very liberal woman, and she was one of the major proponents of birth control. She was who had convinced her husband he should talk about birth control. Bertie lost his parents, the liberal people in his family. He moved with his grandfather, who again was a very, very big man. He moved with his grandfather, and he lost his grandfather as well within 2 years. Finally, the job of raising him was sent to his grandmother, and the grandmother was a conservative Christian. So there is a sect of Christianity which is Presbyterianism. So they are Protestants, but they accept new scientific methods. For example, his dadi accepted Darwinism, the idea that Darwin's theory of evolution. But still, she was very much someone who wanted that the next generation should be Christians and value Christian morals and ethics and everything. So now comes the fun part. His parents had written in their will that they want their kid to be raised agnostic. Because his mother died from diphtheria, his father knew that he would not be living long. So they had written that anything happens, I want my kid to be raised agnostic. He had even appointed a godfather. The godfather, Mill, died when he was 1. So the godfather didn't live, the parents didn't live, the grandfather didn't live, the elder sister didn't live, and he was moved with the only influence he had, which was his grandmother, who was a Protestant Christian. The grandfather petitioned the court that this provision that he should be raised agnostic, this should be removed, and the court agreed somehow. So yeah, he was moved to a missionary kind of lodge, Pembroke Lodge, and he was raised there till he was 18. Christian values were taught to him, and Bible was taught to him, and he was heavily influenced as well. Russell later recalls in his autobiography that at that time when he was young, this quote from Exodus, "Thou shalt not follow a multitude to do evil," that became his motto, and he used to say it again and again. So yeah, against all his parents' wishes, he became a Christian, following Christian. And as an adolescent, he suffered from loneliness and contemplated suicide. So a 10-year kid contemplating suicide. So that is the idea itself shows how deeply this person thought. When he was 11, his brother, the only remaining sibling, his elder brother, he introduced him to the work of Euclid. He bought Euclid's Elements and gave him Euclid. So this is what he had to say later. "It was one of the great events of my life, as dazzling as first love. Nature and books and later mathematics saved me from complete despondency." So the thing which saved him from depression was nature, books and mathematics. He also was a fan of the romantic poet Shelley. So there was a famous English poet who was one of the first. Romanticism. This is not the romantic of Valentine's Day. This is the romanticism of poetry. So he like, for example, if you would have read Robert Frost's poems, Stopping by Woods on a Snowy Evening. So these kinds of poetry is called romantic poetry. So he was very influenced by this kind of poetry. And then Euclid came into his life, and it was like first love. From this time, his arc started, his villain arc. So before he turned 18, he came to the conclusion that there is no free will, and 2 years later that there is no life after death. Finally, at the age of 18, after reading Mill's autobiography, who is this Mill? The Godfather. The Godfather who was appointed by his father, ये मेरे बच्चे को एथिस्ट बनाएगा, जो मर गया था, उसका ही autobiography पढ़ के, he got influenced and he abandoned the first cause argument and became an atheist. Okay. So everything happened. The grandmother was very happy कि I am going to make my pota into a proper Christian, and ये अपना the first cause argument, I'll explain that. So the first cause argument says that everything must have a cause. So this is a table. Someone must be the creator. That creation must have a creator, and so on and so on. So the nature must have a creator, and so there must be a God. This is called the first cause argument. Russell later explained. Russell's argument was that you are separating two things, natural and supernatural. You are saying that every natural thing must have a cause, and then you are ending at God, and then you are saying that there must not be a creator of any God. Russell said that you can apply the same argument on nature as well. Why won't you say that nature can't have a creator? Why do you have to go one step ahead and say God doesn't have a creator? So this is all was his philosophy, and he explained this in numerous books. He was a proper full-on atheist. And later he became a big, he was completely against Christianity, in fact. He said that whatever good religions do, they do more harm. And he says that all the wars, and he was right, in fact, the crusades and everything, he read about these, and he was shattered that so many horrible acts have been done in the name of religion. So yeah, this was his lineage. So it started with his parents wanting him to be an atheist, and then his grandmother having all the power, turning him into a Christian, and finally he making sure that he read. The interesting part is this Mill who influenced him was supposed to influence him one-on-one, but he could not, and later his autobiography did. Alright, so this was his the story of his lineage. Now I'll move on to lemmas. I might be a bit fast, so if you think, then please stop me. So this is a picture of a page from Principia Mathematica. That was one of his magnum opus. Russell wrote two magnum opuses, one in mathematics, which was Principia Mathematica, and other in philosophy. So he wrote this book called Introduction to Western Philosophy. And that book is still recommended as an academic book in philosophy institutions. So that was like, we can say, as we study data analysis from Rodin, so philosophy people study from Russell's book. Alright. So in 1890, he won the scholarship for the mathematical tripos at Trinity. And within 5 years, he became the fellow and started working on non-Euclidean geometry. A very interesting thing is that was the time when people had started working on non-Euclidean geometry. So Euclid had given these axioms, and non-Euclidean geometry didn't follow those axioms. So this was the time when he would have been influenced that, okay, the axioms are broken. I need to work on the axioms themselves, the foundation themselves. So this was the time. Okay, I have included two things. This is the Principia Mathematica of Russell, and that is the Principia Mathematica of Newton. So Newton's Principia Mathematica also is a people sometimes confuse, like these two books have the same name, and both are very influential. right? In 1900, Russell met piano. This piano is piano axioms wala piano, and no, not bajane wala piano. Piano axioms wala piano, and he met him at a conference, and that conference was interestingly, that conference was at the first International Congress of Philosophy, not mathematics. So Russell met piano at the conference for philosophy, and piano gave him this book. So I think Cantor's book, or Cantor, I'm not sure. So he talked to him about the axioms. Piano axioms, if you would have read, are very basic things, like something like a natural number is equal to a natural number, n equal to n. If a equal to b, b equal to c, then a equal to c. Very, very basic things, but these are very important if you are laying out the foundations of mathematics. So Russell met piano at that time, and he motivated him to pursue logic. He came back. This meeting was in Italy. He came back to Cambridge, and he started working on his book, The Principles of Mathematics. This is not Principia Mathematica. This was his first work, The Principles of Mathematics. Before this book, he had written a book on German social democracy. So, at that time also, he had different pursuits, but majorly he was working as a mathematician. His livelihood was coming from mathematics. He proposed that mathematics and logic are the same thing in this book. And that view is called logicism. Logicism itself is a philosophical branch, which says that whatever we study in mathematics and whatever we study in logic, they are exactly the same thing. There is nothing different. So, what Russell wanted to do is that he wanted to lay the foundations from pure logic and build upon all the mathematical knowledge till that time. People had studied mathematics for over thousands of years, but what was happening, that let's say they first started studying geometry, so it became a heap of geometric formulas. But then someone started studying arithmetic or number theory, and that became another heap. And it was the formulas and the theorems were being put on top of each other, and there was no foundation. And during this Principles of Mathematics, this book, this is when he came across the Russell's paradox. So he was very young, in fact, 1872, and it's 1901. So he was very young, 28. So he announced this discovery of his paradox to the German mathematician Gottlob Frege. Gottlob Frege was a very famous logician, and his book was the go-to on logic at that time. So he wrote a letter to Frege that he was reading his books. Russell, in fact, himself being interested in logic, he was a very big fan of Gottlob Frege because he had already formalized a lot of mathematics himself. So he wrote a book, he wrote a letter, and first he said, I'm very impressed, I was very impressed by whatever you wrote, but at the end he's like, there is just one point where I have encountered a difficulty. You state that a function too can act as the indeterminate element. This is formerly believed, but now this view seems doubtful to me because of the following contradiction. Let W be the predicate. To be a predicate that cannot be predicated of itself. So, if you want to convert it in today's language, you would say, let it A be a set which doesn't contain itself. So, take the set of all sets which don't contain themselves. Can W be predicated of itself? From each answer, its opposite follows. You assume it belongs, then you will conclude that it doesn't belong. If you assume it doesn't belong, you will conclude it belongs. Therefore, we must conclude that W is not a predicate. Likewise, there is no class as a totality of these classes, which means there is no set of these sets. Each taken as a totality do not belong to themselves. From this I conclude that under certain circumstances, a definable collection does not form a totality. I have written to Piano about this, but he still knows me an answer. So, Piano ghosted him in that. And he wrote to Gottlob Frege, and there is a folklore or a story that when Frege read the letter, he got hospitalized. So, I mean, I didn't find any documents verifying this thing, but yeah, this is very, I mean, I found it on many Reddit pages and many YouTube videos.
So I heard that he was about to publish one
yeah.
more book,
Right,
and then
right,
that got
right. So this is a comic strip. If you would have come to my quiz, you know how you fan of comics. So this is a comic strip. Its name is Logic Comics, and this is on the life of Bertrand Russell himself. So you can see, is it readable from that? So I'll read it. So Russell is saying, this is the layman's version of Russell's paradox. This is called the barber's paradox. Those who don't shave themselves are shaved by the barber. It sounds innocuous. However, if taken literally, it leads straight to a paradox. For you see, the question arises, who will shave the barber? He obviously cannot choose to shave himself. For being the barber, it would mean that he is shaved by the man who shaves only those who don't shave themselves. But he can't go to the barber for, again, that will mean he will shave himself, which the barber isn't for. So, this was the Russell's paradox. Here, this one is, you can see this person here, it's Gottlob Frege. So, in the first picture, he is asking the printing press person, you need to destroy all the printing plates, all the things on which my second volume is coming out. You need to destroy all of them immediately. Don't you see it's wrong? It's a disgrace. It's a grotesque sham. So the printing press man, he says, "Yeah, professor, we slaved on this for years on end. If you don't take pity on your own work, then at least consider mine. I implore you, sir, don't do it." At the end, he did publish volume 2 of his book with an addendum. Hardly anything more unfortunate can befall a scientific writer than to have one of the foundations of his edifice shaken after the work is finished. I was placed in this position by a letter of Mr. Bertrand Russell just when the printing of this volume was nearing its completion. The collapse of one of my laws, to which Mr. Russell's paradox leads, seems to undermine not only the foundations of my arithmetic, but the only possible foundations of arithmetic as such. And this last line, but the only possible foundations of arithmetic as such, it was proved true by Kurt Gödel later, because he said the foundations couldn't be true. So Russell in fact wrote about this later, that of all the acts of intellectual honesty I have witnessed in my life, none compares with Gottlob Frege's reaction to my paradox. There cannot be greater intellectual courage than this to put the truth above all else. So anyway, Frege proposed a solution that Russell endorsed in his book, his Principia Mathematica, but it was later considered to be satisfactory. This is very interesting. In fact, Russell's paradox is not actually Russell's, if you believe Hilbert. Hilbert says that Zermelo had discovered the paradox 2 or 3 years earlier and had communicated to him from personal letter. So this was a private communication between Hilbert and Zermelo. This Zermelo is the Zermelo-Frankel axioms of the foundation. Yes. Those, the axiom of choice, Zermelo. So, in fact, something else happened here. I'm not written it. So, Russell himself proposed a solution to his paradox. He introduced this theory of types in his Principia Mathematica, but that also had its own share of problems. And in fact, was later, as I said, Principia Mathematica. I'll talk about it in, later. I'll say. So in 1910, Russell was appointed a lecturer at Trinity. From 1910 to 1913, he with Whitehead, he was another logician at Cambridge, published his magnum opus, Principia Mathematica. It soon garnered him immense fame, but as well as ridicule, because the book took 379 pages just to arrive at the conclusion that 1 + 1 = 2. So you would think that why would someone take so many pages? to prove 1 plus 1 equals 2. For this, you need to define what 1 is, what 2 is, what plus means, what equal to means, and all of these. So, I have just included the last bit of it. Here it is. You will see that at the end he is using set theory. A and B are sets of cardinality 1. A intersection B is null. So A union B will be of cardinality 2. So that is the whole language of Principia Mathematica is so bizarre that it is, Russell himself says that there are only 6 people in the world who have read my work. So he wrote that from this proposition, when arithmetical addition has been defined, at this time he had not even defined arithmetical addition. He had just defined addition of the cardinality of 2 sets. So the foundational thing was still missing. He said that it has been, once it has been defined, that 1 plus 1 equals 2. The above proposition is occasionally useful, and it is used at least 3 times in the book. So this is what Russell joked about this thing. Yeah, at the end, as I said, Kurt Gödel proved that what Russell and Whitehead were trying to do was impossible, because they were basing their assumption on piano arithmetic. And piano arithmetic, if consistent, is incomplete. So it was not possible, but still he gave us 3 big volumes which are an inspiration to logicians. He said that all human knowledge is at most a guess. He maintained religion to be little more than superstition, and despite any positive effects, largely harmful to people. He also supported the idea of neutral monism. So this is another philosophical outlook which says that the world consists of just one type of substance, which is neither exclusively mental nor exclusively physical. When I read about this, I was immediately suggested of this idea of Brahma in Advaita Vedanta, that also talks about something which consists, the world consists of only one type of substance. Anyways, I checked, and he was not really influenced by Indian philosophy in any way. This was something which he concluded himself. In 1945, he published the very extensive history of Western philosophy, which is still widely read, and it talks about a wide range of historical figures from pre-Socratics to Leibniz. Right? So, he also proposed the concept of logical atomism. Logical atomism is him implementing mathematics in philosophy. He said that the world consists of ultimate logical facts, which he called atoms, and they cannot be broken down any further, each of which can be understood independently of other facts. So just like he was trying to make some foundational axioms in mathematics, he wanted to do the same in philosophy as well. So he proposed this idea of logical atomism. In the field of ethics, he believed that moral facts are objective, but could be known only through intuition. In 1950, so this is the king of Sweden. He was awarded the Nobel Prize in Literature in recognition of his varied and significant writings in which he champions humanitarian ideals and freedom of thought. So, a mathematician by profession gets a Nobel Prize in Literature for his work on freedom of thought. So, yeah. I really like this excerpt. So he was a big proponent of child education. In fact, when he got a child of himself, he had a child of himself, he did not send him to school, and he founded a new school for the child. He started schools and a new education system, which was more focused on teaching intolerance. So, on teaching tolerance. Sorry. Right. So, yeah, he says, a teacher should endeavor to produce in his pupils the kind of tolerance that springs from an endeavor to understand those who are different from ourselves. It is perhaps a natural human impulse to view with horror and disgust all manners and customs different from those we are used to. Ants and savages put strangers to death. And those who have never traveled either physically or mentally find it difficult to tolerate the queer ways and outlandish beliefs of other nations and other times, other sects and other political parties. This is very true in our times as well. This kind of ignorant intolerance is the antithesis of a civilized outlook and is one of the greatest dangers to which our overcrowded world is exposed. So with this, I'll end this section on logos. Finally, this is Libertas. This is Russell, a very old Russell, holding a banner which says End Anglo-American Insurgency in Vietnam. So this was against Vietnam War. His first political activity was as the independent liberal candidate in the 1907 by-election for the Wimbledon constituency. He knew that he is not going to win, in fact. He himself says that he was very sure that he is not going to win. But at that time, women didn't have voting rights. And he somehow wanted people to just be aware that women and females are suffering. So he published this thing, Vote for Russell. And here he says that he hoped that he used the campaign to promote the cause of female suffrage. So Mr. Chaplin was the person in the office at that time. Why didn't Mr. Chaplin mind the baby? When he was president of the local government board from 1895 to 1900, overcrowding and bad sanitary conditions caused the unnecessary sacrifice of 40,000 infant lives every year. What did he do for the protection of children and reduction of infant mortality? If women had parliamentary votes, they would try to alter the bad land laws, which cause these bad housing conditions and result in such wicked waste of life. But Mr. Chaplin wants to make the baby's food and clothing dearer. And this will only make matters worse. Therefore, vote for Russell and give women votes to protect it. So this was one of the first times. This was the first time he actually fought in an election. In fact, he fought for 2 more times, and he lost all of them. So, but still, all his campaigns were more of an awareness campaign than fight for power. During World War I, he was one of the few people to engage in active pacifist activities. In 1916, due to his absence of allegiance to the war effort, he was dismissed from Trinity College. He was fined 100 euros. So 100 euros in 1916, so I calculated that would be about 8 lakh rupees. He was fined 100 euros, which he refused to pay, in the hope that he would be sent to prison. Kuch to naam hoga. But his books were sold at auction today's zamana. His books were sold, and in fact, his well-wishers only bought the books, and they are kept in a museum and confiscated by police. It's all written all over them. So G.H. Hardy, Ramanujan's advisor, he wrote a book, Bertrand Russell and Trinity, in which he says that the suspension of Russell was completely against anything which the professors wanted. They had themselves requested the authorities to not suspend, to not dismiss Russell, but the authority didn't listen because of course the war at times. 2 years later, he gave a public lecture against inviting the US to enter the war on UK side, resulting which he was sent to in prison, and he was sent in prison for 6 months. So finally, उसको जाना था जेल, वो चला गया. And it's very interesting. He wrote, "I found prison in many ways quite agreeable. I had no engagements, no difficult decisions to make, no fear of callers, no interruptions to my work. I read enormously. I wrote a book, Introduction to Mathematical Philosophy, and began the work for the analysis of mind. I was rather interested in my fellow prisoners, who seemed to me in no way morally inferior to the rest of the population, though they were on the whole slightly below the usual level of intelligence, as was shown by their having been caught." So, he was interested in his fellow prisoners. He was sure that ये बाकियों से morally तो ज़्यादा नीचे नहीं है, बाकी लोग भी इतने ही दुष्ट हैं, लेकिन ये थोड़े बेवकूफ पे ये पकड़ा गए, वो पकड़ाते नहीं. In August 1920, he traveled to Soviet Russia and he met Lenin. In fact, he was sent by the UK to study the rise of Lenin, and he met Lenin. And he later said that he found Lenin disappointing, sensing an impish cruelty in him. He also visited China to deliver lectures in philosophy, where he met Rabindranath. Before leaving China, he became gravely ill with pneumonia, and the Japanese press reported him to be dead. So, this is the New York Times, 1921. Bertrand Russell reported dead. English philosopher and sociologist said to have died in Peking, March 28. Peking is the old name of Beijing. He was accompanied to China with his lover Dora. And Dora, so after China, they went to Japan as well. And the Japanese press were all, Russell, aaya hai, baat karenge usse. Dora came in front of the press and said, Mr. Bertrand Russell, having died according to the Japanese press, is unable to give interviews to Japanese journalists. So, yeah, that happened, and in fact, the Japanese were obviously, they were not happy, and they wrote that he's not a good person and all. Russell's views about war changed over time. So, this is very interesting. He was completely against human suffering in war. He never wanted war. So, in 1937, when Germany was was fighting against England, he said, if the Germans succeed in sending an invading army to England, we should do best to treat them as visitors. Give them quarters, invite the commander and chief to dine with the prime minister, in hopes that the war will end. But within 3 years, he realized what Hitler is. That with the rise of Nazism, he concluded that Adolf Hitler taking all of Europe would be a permanent threat to democracy. So he changed his stance. 1950s and 1960s, he spent protesting against nuclear disarmament and opposing the Vietnam War. At the old age of 89, he was jailed for 7 days. So at an 89-year-old, he was taking part in an anti-nuclear demonstration in London, and he was jailed for 7 days for that. In fact, he was offered exemption कि भाई बूढ़े हो गए हो तुम रहने दो. If you promise me that you will show good behavior, I will leave you. But Russell said कि नहीं, I will not give good behavior. So he was jailed. So Einstein-Russell manifesto, the scientific manifesto which many prominent scientists signed, which was a notice to the world. They wrote it as notice to the world. Renounce war or perish, world peace or universal death. So they wanted ending of all nuclear war. So that was the Russell-Einstein manifesto. In 1962, Russell played a public role in the Cuban Missile Crisis. For those people who don't know, the Cuban Missile Crisis was the closest we have come to a full-blown nuclear war. So this was when Kennedy, what he did was he placed these Soviet Russia had put missiles in Cuba, and Kennedy also placed some missiles in Italy and they were both threatening, and they gave an ultimatum कि नहीं भाई हमको मार देंगे. So finally Russell sent this telegram to President Kennedy: your action desperate, threat to human survival, no conceivable justification. Civilized man condemns it. They will not have mass murder. Ultimatum means war and peace. So this was his fight for liberty. We have come to the end of this talk. And this is a stamp by India. So actually, Bertrand Russell met V.K. Krishna Menon, so the India League guy in Britain, and he in fact was the chairman of India League for some time. Bertrand Russell himself, and he fought for India's independence. In fact, I mean, just like supported, full support. And so, Bertrand, Indian Stamp Service, they published a stamp for this legacy. And then there is just one video. I'll just play this and then my talk will be.
One last question. Suppose, Lord Russell, this film were to be looked at by our descendants, like a Dead Sea Scroll in 1,000 years' time. What would you think it's worth telling that generation about the life you've lived and the lessons you've learned from it?
I should like to say two things. One intellectual and one moral. The intellectual thing I should want to say to them is this. When you are studying any matter or considering any philosophy, ask yourself only what are the facts and what is the truth that the facts bear out. Never let yourself be diverted either by what you wish to believe or by what you think would have beneficent social effects if it were believed. But look only and solely at what are the facts. That is the intellectual thing that I should wish to say. The moral thing I should wish to say to them is very simple. I should say, love is wise, hatred is foolish. In this world, which is getting more and more closely interconnected, we have to learn to tolerate each other. We have to learn to put up with the fact that some people say things that we don't like. We can only live together in that way. And if we are to live together and not die together, we must learn a kind of charity and a kind of tolerance, which is absolutely vital to the continuation of human life on this planet.
Thank you very much for a wonderful talk, Prassanna. It's time for feedback form. Please share your